Your brand may be staying on top of current trends, but are you agile enough to stay relevant, resilient, and successful as customers, competition, and the world continues to change at a breakneck pace? I'm thrilled to share the newly revised version of my first book, The Agile Brand. I'm calling it The Agile Brand Revisited. It's been updated to reflect our continually changing world, and it provides 7 principles that form the backbone of an agile brand, offering detailed insights and actionable steps for incorporating them into your business strategy. This is the book that started it all, and I'm excited to share it with you. It's now available in print and digital formats and available everywhere. Learn more by going to the Agile Brand Guide website at www.agilebrandguide.com. Welcome to Season 4 of The Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom, where we discuss business agility through customer experience, employee experience, and digital transformation. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed on this show, you can go to my website at gregkihlstrom.com and read my latest articles or get a copy of my latest book, Meaningful Measurement of the Customer Experience, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kihlstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile Brand podcast. Welcome to a special episode of the show brought to you in partnership with Arlington Economic Development, where we discuss issues related to the workforce, the role of place and the future of work, and the role of the creative sector in a larger business context. We call this Return on Creativity. While hybrid and remote work are here to stay in many roles across most industries, there is an even greater need for the creation of spaces that can incorporate what the workforce needs to both live and work. Today, we're going to talk about what it takes to build a place for the future of work. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Marian Marquez, Director of Business Investment Group at Arlington Economic Development. First, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you do at Arlington Economic Development?
Thank you, Greg. It's great to be here. As you mentioned, I'm the Director for Business Investment with Arlington County at Arlington Economic Development. We are, otherwise known as AED, we're part of county government, and my team specifically is responsible for attracting companies to Arlington, to locate in Arlington or expand in Arlington. And then what we try to do is keep them here by providing great services for them and all their employees. On my team, it's really 2 teams within one. I've got one group that's kind of the relationship managers, and they're working to engage companies across the U.S., around the world, who may be interested in an East Coast location, and they're going to be the ones that every Arlington company will be familiar with. And then the other half of the team is really kind of the infrastructure that's required to engage with those companies. So we've got an economist that collects a lot of our business intelligence about the community, and for companies like Amazon, when it was doing its HQ2 search in terms of collecting all the data that they needed to make their decision. And we also have a marketing manager that helps us respond to competitive bids for companies. So kind of runs the gamut, but we're very focused on keeping Arlington a really attractive place for companies to be and to operate, and for all of their employees, a great place for them to live, work, and play.
Great. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about this and diving in here. We're going to look at this idea of building a place for the future of work, and we're going to look at it through a few different lenses. But let's start with the technology that's needed. So Arlington in particular has been forming some interesting and forward-thinking partnerships in this regard. To start this discussion, first, what is a smart city, and how does this concept lay the foundations for the future of work?
That's a great question. And I'll start by saying that, smart city means a lot of different things to different people. And it's something that Arlington has been engaged with, for quite some time. So thinking about it from our perspective, and kind of more of a definition as it applies to economic development, we see smart city as being a network, kind of a combination where digital infrastructure and assets in a community get combined with the placemaking and the experience, and where you're leveraging kind of data-driven solutions to improve quality of life in the city, both in terms of sustainability, attractiveness for businesses, workers, residents, and kind of increasing efficiencies with everyone who lives, works, and plays in the community. So very high level without getting, it can be a very technical definition, but the way I like to think of it is where you have kind of an interplay between technology and the kind of day-to-day experience that you want to create in a community. And you kind of maximize that potential.
So what are some of the things that are required in order to make a smart city work effectively?
Two things I would point out. One is there is the technology piece, right? What makes a smart city work is when you have sort of an Internet of Things and you have systems that are speaking to each other, whether that's, traffic control or garbage collection or within a building, an office building, different parts, sensors on the building, basically all of these, and talking to light posts that are connected. In order for that exchange of information to happen, to improve the processes within the community, they need to be able to talk to each other. And I'll talk a little bit later on about specific project we're working on, partnership with JBG Smith, which, as you likely know, is largest developer in our National Landing area. Yeah. To build what will be the state's and perhaps the East Coast true first smart city. So technology, depending on what's happening within the smart city, there are a lot of layers of what JBG Smith refers to as the technology stack that are required, and I can talk a little bit more about those. But I did want to point out the other piece that is critical, and as we've kind of gone down this path of doing a public-private partnership between Arlington County and JBG Smith, is really the buy-in and the commitment from the community itself. The city or the community, at whatever levels are appropriate, within the government and the authority, needs to be committed to this innovation and to becoming a smart city, because there are a lot of services that may be municipal services that in an ideal world would be layered into any smart city plan, and you need to have all the right departments kind of signing off and getting the support they need from leadership to kind of engage from a technology standpoint, an investment standpoint, investing their resources to work on this, really have a vision of the future and see, buy into the importance of having a smart city, both in terms of what that means for being maybe a more sustainable community, a more efficient community, more attractive to businesses, because in some cases, there are companies with technologies that are very interested in being in a particular community because that community may be interested in purchasing their technology down the road.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, it's a change initiative. I work a lot on the inside of organizations. Any change initiative takes people, process, and technology to happen, right? So it's I think this is it's at a very different scale than this is across not only government but citizens and everything like that. So yeah, definitely the technology component is big, but it takes a lot of things working together.
Right. And in some cases, it's not just conceptually the buy-in, but, something that we're going to be navigating as we work together to build up the smart city and innovation district in the National Landing area is just, what does that mean in terms of asking Arlington County to do things differently when it comes to permitting or zoning? I mean, if you want to build some kind of test bed for a certain technology or get, sensors installed on lampposts, there are processes you need to go through with the county to get permission to do those things. And so, kind of from very high level down to brass tacks, the engagement of the public sector and everybody being on the same page is critical. We're fortunate to have that support in Arlington, as you know, because you're from the region as well, and you've worked in the region for quite some time. But I think Arlington has shown its commitment to smart development and touts itself as a smart city, and that commitment has been there for several decades. So we're fortunate to have forward-looking leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. I've started quite a few businesses in Arlington, so I definitely have a pretty good understanding of that. Well, and you mentioned some of the work you're doing with JBG Smith. Do you mind elaborating on that a little bit? I mean, talk about some of the stuff you're working on.
Sure. Yeah. So we were really excited to make an announcement last summer of our partnership with JBG Smith. They approached us early last year. They hold a lot of property down in National Landing in and around HQ2, all the way down to Virginia Tech's Innovation Campus that's getting built just across the border in Alexandria, and approached us about leasing the dark fiber that Arlington County owns and laid beneath the roads all across Arlington County going back about 10 years, which is sometimes referred to as Connect Arlington. Initially, it was done as a way to provide better coverage and connectivity for county operations and have some autonomy from commercial providers, more cost effective, and then, certainly to connect all the kind of critical functions of the county, but also the schools. And excess dark fiber was laid underground for economic development purposes, and really to be an asset for companies who are looking for that additional, kind of boost or connectivity that they need to power their businesses. And in large part had not been taken full advantage of. Meanwhile, JBG Smith, had started laying plans to start to build up an innovation district. You probably saw in headlines, I remember if it was early last year, late of 2020, that they had actually bought a portion of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And, in order for them to realize their vision of building 5G smart city and National Landing, they really needed that either to access our dark fiber or to build it on their own. And so they approached us with the county with an unsolicited proposal to effectively lease the dark fiber from Arlington County long term. And so we started at Arlington Economic Development, and in very close partnership with our colleagues in Department of Technology Services, which we call DTS, our acronym. We started working closely with JBG Smith and their Smart Cities team to negotiate the terms of this. We saw it as a win-win solution for us. I mean, our team and our department, as I mentioned, is very focused on attracting companies and filling up these buildings, and the types of companies. So JBG Smith has both residential and commercial buildings, and they're very focused on both types of tenants. Yeah. And but where we're very closely aligned with them is on their commercial buildings. A lot of the companies that they're looking to attract by having this type of technology and asset to offer aligns closely with the companies that we've been working to attract to the county, who may, by virtue of the mission critical work that they do, or very high tech or Department of Defense work, need a lot of power and great connectivity with very little kind of the quality of the connectivity needs to be at a certain level, and need secure systems, and basically having access to the county's dark fiber and the investment that we made would allow JBG Smith to kind of accelerate their plan to build up that technology infrastructure, which we know is critical for these companies. And there is a benefit in doing that quickly and kind of defining ourselves, having Arlington be one of the few places that companies can come here to work on the kind of things that they want to work on. So we worked for, the first part of last year on this project together to define the terms and conditions, and took it to our board in the summer. And it was approved by our county board, and we are working with them quite closely. They're actually, our director, Telly Tucker, is currently with the state of Virginia at a big tech conference in Europe, talking to companies who are interested in this. And actually, JBG Smith is there doing the same. They're very focused on building up the technology components, which starts with a dark fiber and has kind of 5 different layers, the top of which being, is the spectrum that they acquired in 2020. That's really going to build this kind of secure technology stack that is so attractive to these high growth industries like machine learning, AI, cloud computing, Internet of Things, cybersecurity. Yeah. And So we're really excited about it, and we're really excited that the world is kind of opening up again, and companies are, ready to make some decisions about taking space.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're really excited because they've made a lot of progress on the technology front. They announced a partnership. They, being JBG Smith, announced a partnership with AT&T as one of the providers for the 5G, and are starting to announce some really exciting things. Virginia Tech Transportation Institute is pursuing a smart mobility coalition. Kind of looking at, as you may or may not know, they have an incredible transportation institute down in Blacksburg, on their Blacksburg campus, and they're looking at, given what they know is being built around National Landing and the university being there and HQ2, what are some transportation and smart mobility projects and use cases that could be piloted in this area? And so it's really exciting to be able to start moving forward on some concrete projects and have concrete discussions with companies. In fact, I just wrapped up a meeting here with a company that's looking to do some really interesting things that require, the dark fiber connection. And so yeah, we're excited to be able to move forward on this great partnership that we have with JBG Smith.
So what about the role of education and universities in building smart cities?
That's a great question. I would say that it's critical. When we've looked at successful smart cities and innovation districts, generally there is kind of an anchor university that is involved in the partnership, both from developing the talent and through the students, whether it's undergrad or graduate level, but also through the research that's undertaken by faculty and, finding partnerships with industry to commercialize that, spin off startups. We're really excited. I mentioned the Virginia Tech Innovation Campus. We are also really, really excited to actually groundbreaking is, I think, taking place next month for George Mason's innovation campus right here in Arlington in the Virginia Square neighborhood. It's called IDIA. So it's the Institute for Digital Innovation, and they have very much in their vision as well. And we're in discussions with them about what that would mean in terms of an innovation district that's looking more at kind of the Rosslyn-Ballston corridor. But they have very much that vision for their campus to be, and their new campus here to be a site of innovation. And they have a space that is going to be dedicated strictly for industry, so that some of that collaboration I talked about earlier between students, startups, and faculty, and then maybe some of the larger industry players around the GMU Arlington campus can really take off. They have a really, really cool lab, which I've had the kind of an R&D lab, like we were talking about earlier, Industry 4.0 on the campus there. And so we're very excited to see that take off and kind of create the buzz of innovation in that part of Arlington County as well.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, and you touched on several components of this already, but just to kind of ask the question, because a lot of people, when they're thinking about physical office space and company headquarters and all those kinds of things, I mean, we're coming off of 2 years almost of remote, and if not hybrid work and stuff. But why is it still so important that a company be smart about where it locates its offices?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and several different thoughts to share. But I think first and foremost, the place that a company chooses to locate its office, or at least, maybe several offices that they choose to have now around workforce, it really should be a place where those employees want to be. And I keep saying live, work, and play, but I think those divisions between live, work, and play are getting even more blurred right now that we're coming out of 2 years working, mostly remote. So I think, even if hybrid work is shifting more in the direction of remote work, what we've seen is very few companies are willing to take the leap to fully remote, or what they call remote first. So we still have, people coming into the office, one day, even if it's 1 day a week or 2 days a week, you still have clients that are going to be coming in for really meetings that are really important to do in person and face to face. And with a lot of companies around here, corporate headquarters, um, workers are still needing to fly in and out to meet clients and partners. So you still want to be in a place that's really well connected to the airport and other modes of transport, highly accessible, which we're really fortunate in this region, to be a leader in. But I think the other piece is just more about the experience, right? If you have, whether you have people here that are working for companies in Arlington or people that are living in Arlington working mostly remote, you want this to be kind of a sticky place that those workers feel is fun
Yeah.
to be in, whether that's working or living. So, cool experiences, cool restaurants, cool amenities nearby. I think, the lesson we all knew before Amazon, but I think Amazon really, that project really drove home, is that when you're talking about attracting companies, you have to think about what's most important to them, and what's most important to them is their talent. So then you got to shift the conversation to the talent. What's most important to the talent?
Yeah.
And that talent is going to want to be in a place that has kind of the amenities and the lifestyle and things that they want from day to day.
And we've talked about how technology certainly improves companies, and the companies that are attracted by the access to the dark fiber and things, 5G and all of that kind of stuff. But what about doesn't it have an added bonus of helping people in the non-work parts of their life as well? So how are some of those things going to be beneficial to people living here, even if they're where they work isn't headquartered here?
Oh yeah, I think the technology components. It started to say with JBG Smith that they have both residential and commercial buildings, but they're very much part of their goal with the smart city is very much geared towards residents. So whether you're in an office, if you're in a fully connected kind of 5G smart city, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be in an office building to have that highly reliable, redundant connectivity
Yeah.
on your devices. You could be sitting in a park or sitting in a cafe and basically able to make your office wherever you want it. So, whereas that was a great idea pre-pandemic, it seems like genius now, right?
Right.
Because who knew that everybody was actually going to be in their quote unquote office while sitting on their balcony or at a cafe nearby. And so, I mean, that's kind of the vision. And JBG Smith likes to, I don't know if this is something that they coined or if this is out there in other smart cities, but kind of the urban operating system. So you're gonna have sort of like an app that connects you when you're in National Landing as a resident or worker, wherever you are. And everything that you interact with in that environment is connected and is on that operating system, which is constantly getting upgraded. And so you think about taking a scooter or ordering something from a cafe that like a robot delivers. I mean, this all seems very futuristic, but that's not just the worker. You're talking about all those people who work there and who may be spending the bulk of their working hours kind of interacting in the community versus being in an office somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine that I guess back in the day, let's say there were certain amenities that companies looked for around their office, like maybe places to eat lunch, or something, parking and stuff like that. But how has this changed? I mean, you've touched on that people are living and working in the same place. How has this affected what you're doing, in helping to attract companies? Like, has this complicated things? Has this, what's uh, I guess how has that kind of changed in the shift of, like, creating these communities and stuff like that in the last few years?
Yeah, it certainly has changed the way not just AED, but there's, big conversations underway in the county right now about, um, how we have developed our community. And we are, as you know, primarily office. And what we have been learning through this pandemic and coming out is that, and we're actually our team is doing a big survey right now of the business community in Arlington about kind of their plans for, and we've been keeping tabs on it, but return to office and how many days in the office they're expecting their people to be. And it's going to take some time to catch up, but it's going to be a big difference. And we see every day companies shedding space, office space, or putting their space on the market for sublease. And so we really need to rethink, what what the future looks like, what companies, what kind of space they want.
Yeah.
It's not kind of traditional office. I mean, I think for one, I think Arlington, we're quite fortunate because a lot of the trends we've seen is that by and large, tech companies are still driving the growth in office. They are the companies that even during the pandemic, we've seen hang on to their space or expand, or like, Microsoft is going to be opening their big office in Rosslyn this year.
Yeah.
The kind of announcements, the happy announcements we've seen during the pandemic have all been tech and kind of headquarters. And lucky for us, Arlington, we play very well in those two, for the reasons we talked about before. Access to the talent, access to the transportation and infrastructure, airports, all those stand us up very well. But we're still expecting, to see overall less demand, and more space to meet that demand. And we know what happens when from Econ 101, that means that, the price that can be charged for leases is going to go down over time. And that can have a pretty sizable impact on the county's budget, which drives a lot of, its value from the commercial buildings. And we were specifically built that way, intentionally, to have these kind of dense urban corridors. So anyway, we're rethinking, we're doing some work to understand industry demand and what that looks like. A lot of, we do know a lot of companies need some space. It may just not be as big as before, but the configuration is different. We've also, especially from our tech company, seen a lot of interest in having these kind of R&D, labs of some kind, and not what you think of, not like manufacturing, like not heavy R&D, but sort of industry 4.0, basically one big computer lab, and AI models turning and machine learning and all this, kind of R&D innovation center of the future. And, there's work to be done here, because depending on what that looks like, does that, per Arlington's definition of uses that are allowable in our buildings, is that allowed? And if it's not, how do we start making some of the changes from a regulatory standpoint to be ready for those prospects, so that we're not having to go through, a long process with our community and the commissions and the board to affect, to be ready for tenants like that. So we're proactively, out there trying to understand from the companies themselves, but also from brokers and the design firms that these companies work with, about what does that space of the future look like. So that's, from the county standpoint and space, there's a lot going on there so that we are positioned well, because it's important for everything that we know and love about Arlington to be able to continue to offer all the great services it does. We need to be mindful of, the impact that this changed office demand is going to have on our budget and everything. I would say the other piece is really, and I think the county and the community has always been focused on this, but there's kind of a renewed focus on wanting to continue to be the community where people want to live, right? And quality of life. Continue to have the great schools, the great transportation, sense of community, because, we need those residents. I think we're fortunate in Arlington because of the way Arlington was developed, where it's a very balanced communities between residential and commercial. So we've continued our small businesses and retail, of course, took a hit during the pandemic, but have fared quite well because we have so many people in the residential buildings coming down to work in the cafes or, grab a bite at Sweet Green during lunch, versus some parts of like DC, for example, where there's really no residential around those office buildings. And, the businesses have been very, very hard hit with people not coming into the office. And
The reality is striking. While we can stream movies on demand and order anything to our doorstep within a click, healthcare interactions often feel needlessly complex. Healthcare marketers, this one's for you. In Shop, Stream, Heal, author Adeline Ashley shares actionable insights from industry leaders like Netflix, Amazon, and Delta, showing how healthcare can thoughtfully adapt their winning strategies. This isn't about technology for technology's sake. It's about making healthcare more accessible, intuitive, and human. Drawing from real-world successes and lessons learned, the book shows you how to create healthcare experiences that truly meet patient needs while preserving clinical excellence. Shop, Stream, Heal by Adeline Ashley features a foreword from Dava Flanagan, CEO of Sitecore. It's published by the Agile brand and now available in print and digital formats on Amazon. Go to shopstreamheal.com for more information.
Heard and seen that in other cities too that didn't take such a balanced approach to their development. And so I think, a lot of people are just thinking of how do we continue to attract workers to want to live here, regardless of where they're quote unquote reporting for work, right? It could be somewhere else in the country, somewhere else outside of the US. But we want to make sure we continue to have these kind of amenity rich, experience rich offerings for workers, and I know there's been a lot of announcements of, developers who had gone in to, develop a commercial building and are now doing conversions to residential. So what that ends up looking like in the long run is still, to be seen. But, rest assured that county, there are a lot of work efforts underway to make sure that we are thinking proactively and strategically about this to be set up for the future, because otherwise we're going to miss out on the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And to kind of follow on that, one last question before we wrap up here, talking about the role of public-private partnerships in creating this city of the future. So you've already touched on, the relationship with JBG Smith, for instance, as well as others, either existing or in the works. What's kind of the mindset, but behind working with corporations as part of Arlington County, and what do you think is the ideal relationship between public and private sector?
It's a great question, and something I've thought about many times through my professional career, because I've worked at several levels in government and also in several roles in the private sector. And I really think that, the government, and I guess here speaking specifically about local government, but really should be kind of enabling and harnessing the innovation that's happening in the private sector and within corporations who are kind of the cutting edge and the forefront of whether it's technology or best practices, and putting guardrails in place where necessary to, steer development and innovation in the direction that aligns, with the values of the community, which, as we know, Arlington is very active community, and this people who live and work here feel like they have a voice and weigh in on the direction the community is going in. But the way I see it is our role in government is really kind of helping create an environment that's conducive to growth and sustainable growth, especially in this community, and finding that optimal balance between the growth and what that looks like, and then the community values. And that's going to look a little different in different communities. But, we have to remember that, I guess I would just kind of drive it home to balance, right? I mean, there were a lot of conversations that I had with neighbors. I'm an Arlington resident, after HQ2 was announced, and about, well, gosh, we're just going to get taken over by these corporations. And I had to remind, it's all of a sudden, National Landing there's going to be traffic and all these, strain on all of our resources and the schools and everything else. And, kind of gently remind people that, this is companies like Amazon and like all the other great ones, small, medium sized companies that call Arlington home. I mean, that is what allows us to enjoy all the great things that we enjoy as residents in Arlington, like our great parks and our great summer camps and our great, that doesn't come out of thin air. That's value that's created by the companies that, we're fortunate to have here in Arlington, to call Arlington home. So that's a long-winded answer, but I would say balance and, having government kind of enable and harness the great innovation that's happening in the private sector to benefit us all, right?
Yeah, totally agree. Well, Marian, thanks so much for joining the show. For those listening, what's the best way for them to learn more about what you're doing and keep in touch?
I would love to connect with anybody who's interested in the work that we do or following us. You can follow us on LinkedIn, and I'm not as active on Twitter, but we do have a lot of our team. And I don't know if there's a way to link in the notes for the podcast, but we have a beautiful new website with lots of great information that we just unveiled last week. And I would love to point people there and to just follow us on social media and reach out to me on LinkedIn if you'd like to learn more or be connected.
Yeah, and I'll put a link in the show notes when this goes live. Well, again, I'd like to thank Marian Marquez, Director of Business Investment Group at Arlington Economic Development, for joining the show. To learn more about Return on Creativity, brought to you by the Agile brand and Arlington Economic Development, please go to returnoncreativity.com. Thanks for listening to the Agile brand with Greg Kihlstrom. See you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile brand with Greg Kihlstrom podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.theagilebrand.show. To get a copy of my latest book, Meaningful Measurement of the Customer Experience, visit my website at gregkihlstrom.com. Until next week, stay agile.